There was a bird on our porch, not sleeping, dead. Its neck was bent like it had tried to look behind itself before the end. Feathers all puffed out, one wing extended, the other crumpled underneath, just lying there like it had dropped out of the sky in the middle of a thought. I remember standing there in my bathrobe, cereal spoon still in my hand, staring at it while Clara sipped her coffee behind me. She didn't say a word, just that silence. The kind where you know someone's already made a decision and is just waiting for you to catch up. That was the beginning. I didn't know it at the time, but that bird wasn't the only thing in our house that had stopped flying. My name's Merritt. Yeah, weird name. I get that a lot. My mom liked old family names and had a thing for antique recipe cards. I'm 41. I used to fix security systems for clinics and schools. I say used to because now I mostly just fix silence. Empty rooms. Memories that won't stop repeating. Claire is 39, or maybe she's 28, depending on what she's wearing and who she's with. When we first met, she told me she had never once missed a sunrise in her life. That used to make me feel lucky. Now it just makes me wonder how many of those sunrises were with someone else. We were married for 11 years. We were quiet people, but the kind who understood each other's quiet. I thought that was rare. I thought that meant something. Turns out, silence can mean two very different things depending on who's listening. For weeks, Clara had been moving around the house like a ghost that knew it was being watched. She'd close drawers slower. She'd take calls from the bathroom. She started wearing lipstick again. Red, not the soft pink she used to wear when it was just us. I noticed all of it, and I said nothing because that's what I do. I notice everything and I say nothing. But that morning, with the dead bird between us and the coffee going cold in her hand, she finally spoke. Merritt, I think I'm done. No argument, no build-up, just those 5 words. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask why. I just looked at her, then down at the bird, and nodded. Walked back inside, took off my robe, got dressed like I was heading to work. But I never went back to that house, and she never saw it coming. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't take my favorite hoodie, the watch Clara gave me on our 5th anniversary, or even my phone charger. I walked out of our house with nothing but my wallet, car keys, and the awful realization that I'd spent over a decade mistaking routine for love. The moment I shut the door behind me, the silence changed. It stopped being tense and turned into something terrifyingly permanent. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove past the same grocery store we used to argue about whether oat milk was worth the price. Past the park where Clara once cried because a stranger's baby waved at her. Past everything familiar, which suddenly started looking like evidence instead of memories. I ended up in a hotel off Route 7, the kind with plastic keys and carpets that look like they've never truly been clean. I asked for a room that didn't face the parking lot. I didn't want to see people coming or going. I didn't want anyone to see me. Not like this. That night I tried sleeping. Tried. But every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear her voice. Not crying, not angry, just flat. I think I'm done. Not even a we're done. She was done. Like I'd just been dismissed from a meeting I didn't know I was attending. And suddenly, I started questioning everything. Why had she stopped asking me to pick her up from class months ago? Why did she start locking the bathroom door even when she wasn't showering? Why was there always one too many glasses in the drying rack when I came home late from work? Those little moments, I had chalked them up to distance, to stress, to the way marriage changes over time. But now, with all the noise of denial finally cleared away, it was obvious something was happening and I had let it. The next morning, I called in sick. I stared at the cracked ceiling of the hotel room until noon. Then I grabbed my laptop from the trunk of my car. For a man who never asked questions when he should have, I was now determined to answer every single one. I started with the family iCloud account. Clara had never bothered to change her backup settings. I knew her password. It was the name of her first cat. Capital M exclamation point at the end. She once joked that if I ever cheated, she'd find me through it. Turns out she should have worried about herself. Within 5 minutes, I had access to her synced files, notes, photos, shared calendar events. It wasn't a treasure trove, but it was enough. Enough to crack open the facade I had believed in for years. There were multiple calendar entries labeled PT 8 p.m. Clara wasn't in physical therapy. Not since her ankle healed 2 years ago. I clicked on one of the photo previews, and there it was, her in a mirror selfie, dressed in a tight red dress I had never seen before, leaning into someone else's arm, a man I didn't recognize. A hotel room behind them, bed unmade. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might throw up. It wasn't just betrayal. It was practice. She had been rehearsing the end of us long before she said those 5 words. And I realized she had never expected me to look back. But I was about to dig up everything. I stared at that photo for longer than I'd like to admit. It wasn't just that Clara was with another man. It was the way she looked at herself in the mirror. Chin tilted slightly, that half smile she used to save for our private moments. I knew that look. I had memorized it. But in that photo, it didn't belong to me. It hadn't for a while, apparently. I kept going. Her notes app was cleaner than I expected. Just a few grocery lists, a half-written poem about rain, which she never showed me, and one labeled PT Contact. I opened it. Miles K. 302, room 214. That was it. No hearts, no babe. No dramatic declarations of love. Just logistics, like I was a detail that had been deleted. And he was the new appointment on her calendar. I copied the number and dropped it into a search engine. You'd be surprised how much you can find if you know where to look. A public directory confirmed his full name. Miles Keatering, 44, works in creative strategy for an advertising firm in Wilmington. Married, no kids. Ironic, considering Clara used to tell me children were too loud to think straight. I felt a strange calm as I scrolled through Miles's professional profile. That kind of masculine charm. Quotes about storytelling through design, posing next to a vintage motorcycle he probably didn't know how to start. But it wasn't jealousy I felt. It was clarity. I wasn't a villain in her story. I was just the placeholder. So I did what Clara never expected me to do. I made a plan. I started small. I drove back to our house that night while I knew she was out teaching. I didn't go inside. I sat across the street in the car with the headlights off and just watched. Nothing dramatic, no cameras, no spy gear. I just wanted to see the life she lived without me. At exactly 10:13 p.m., a black SUV pulled up. Not Claire's usual ballet students being dropped off. This was different. Out stepped Miles. Tall, lean, smug-looking even from a distance. He didn't knock. He walked in like he belonged there. I didn't move, didn't scream. I just gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white and reminded myself, she thinks I'm gone. And that gives me time. The next day, I booked a meeting with a private investigator. His name was Gene, ex-military. Barely blinked when I told him the details. He handed me a legal pad and asked, "What do you want? Revenge or the truth?" I said, "Both, but let's start with the truth." Gene told me it would take a week. He worked fast. I went back to the motel and did what Clara never thought I was capable of. I began preparing my own quiet storm. While I waited, I reread every text she had ever sent me over the last 6 months. They were shorter than they used to be. Dry, functional, the kind you'd send a landlord. "Don't forget milk. I might be late. Can you sign for the package?" There was one in particular that stood out. Sent 2 days before she told me it was over. "Can you check the shed door? I think it's loose again." At the time, I did. I remember walking out in the dark with a flashlight and securing it with a new latch. But now that I looked again, why the shed? We hadn't used it in over a year. It nagged at me until I couldn't take it anymore. I drove back to the house again. She wasn't home. This time I went in. I knew exactly where the spare key was. Under the third stepping stone. I unlocked the back door and walked across the yard like a stranger. Everything felt too still. The lights were off. I walked straight to the shed. Inside, covered by a dusty tarp, I found a black duffel bag. Inside the duffel bag, a burner phone, a second wallet, a stack of printed hotel invoices with different check-in names. One of them even used my last name, her last name. She had built a whole second life. She was stealing my identity to cover hers. And suddenly, I realized something much darker was happening than I ever imagined. This wasn't just cheating. This was something else entirely. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I just sat on the scratchy motel bed with that burner phone in my hand, wondering how long Clara had been planning all of this. The bag in the shed, it wasn't just a sign she was cheating. It was like finding the root system of a tree I never knew was growing under our home. A network of deception so practiced it scared me. The phone had a lock screen, of course, but people like Clara, who think they're smarter than everyone else, always have a blind spot. Hers was predictability. For digit passcode 0411, her birthday, it unlocked on the first try. The messages inside weren't many, but they were specific. The burner was used carefully, only for direct coordination. Short bursts, nothing emotional, just coded logistics. Same place, diff name. Used Carter again. He won't look here. Back in trance like last time. Leave early. You have keys. I'll fake morning class. Every message made me feel like I was looking through a keyhole into a different version of my wife. One I wouldn't recognize if she walked right past me. There were also photos, not many, but enough selfies, mirror pics in bathrooms I'd never seen. Screenshots of money transfers. One particularly chilling message read, "Transferred the 1,800. He thinks it was car repairs." That one hit like a punch in the chest. A few weeks ago, Clara told me she needed repairs on her transmission. I paid without a second thought. Now, I knew that money went toward whatever this second life was. Who the hell was she? I called Jean, the investigator, the moment the sun came up. My voice was shaking, but I tried to sound in control. I told him what I'd found. He just replied, "We're getting close." Close to what? I didn't know, but I was already past the point of return. Later that day, Jean sent me an encrypted folder. Photos, time-stamped, all taken over the past 5 days. Clara and Miles weren't hiding anything. There were images of them leaving the same boutique hotel 3 nights in a row. Her in the red dress, him in a hoodie and sunglasses like that would somehow hide the guilt. But there was something else, a third person. In 2 of the photos, Clara was seen hugging a woman at a gas station outside of town. Not a friend I recognized, not a sister. I'd met Clara's entire family. And then in one photo, the woman handed Clara an envelope. Clara tucked it into her purse like it was routine. I sent the photo to Jean immediately and asked who she was. His reply was short. Name's Karen Webb. Real estate. Clara's silent partner. You've got bigger problems than an affair. Now my hands were actually shaking. What did real estate have to do with anything? Jean called me an hour later. His voice was more serious than before. "Listen, Merritt, this isn't just infidelity," he said. "Your wife's been moving money under your name, small amounts timed around your pay periods. She and this woman are flipping rentals under an LLC that has your social security number listed as a founding member. She's laundering, probably hiding income from the guy, maybe even preparing to dump both of you." Felt like the air was pulled out of my lungs. She had taken my name, my money, my trust, and used them all as tools in a business I didn't know existed. I was just the dull husband, the safety net, the fool she could file taxes through and borrow credit with. And she didn't even have the decency to tell me it was over before building her exit. Now I understood. She didn't just want a new man. She wanted a new life. One where I didn't exist. Not as a partner, not even as a person, just a name on a document. And I knew then this wasn't going to end with me packing up and fading out. She thought I walked away quietly, that I'd stay gone. But Clara forgot who she married. She married a man who notices everything. And I was about to make sure she noticed me one final time. I spent the next 3 days becoming invisible. I moved out of the motel and into a short-term rental using a fake name Jean set up for me. Nothing fancy. A small 1-bedroom above a closed-down sandwich shop with buzzing lights and no working heater. But I didn't need comfort. I needed cover. Jean gave me a burner of my own. Said if I wanted to watch it all collapse, I'd need to do it quietly. I didn't ask how he knew so much about people like Clara. I could tell by his tone he'd seen this movie before. Only this time I wasn't watching from the seats. I was writing the ending. I took time off work, called it a mental health leave. That part wasn't even a lie. I was unraveling, but I was focused. Every day, I studied her life like I was prepping for a court case. I tracked her calendar through cloud syncs she forgot to disable. I made notes of when she left the house, when Miles came over, when Karen casually dropped off envelopes that weren't ever mailed. It wasn't hard. People think they're smart when they're in control, but they get sloppy. They use the same meeting spots. They forget that deleted messages are never truly gone. They don't expect the quiet ones to rise from the ashes. On Thursday, I followed her. Clara left the house around 6:45 p.m. in workout clothes. I knew what was coming. Hot yoga, she used to say, but she always came back smelling like whiskey and hotel soap. This time, I didn't just follow her. I followed the man who followed her. Miles. He pulled in behind her SUV at the parking garage of the Carmichael Hotel. Same place Jean had staked out. I waited 15 minutes, then walked in through the side entrance. I wasn't wearing a disguise, no hat, no sunglasses, just confidence. When you act like you belong, people don't ask questions. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, room 314. It was unlocked. Maybe that was part of their thrill, leaving the door ajar, pretending like no one would dare intrude. But I did. I stepped inside and saw exactly what I expected. Their clothes on the floor, wine glasses on the table, music playing softly and voices, hers, his, laughing, casual, like the world was theirs. I didn't confront them. I didn't scream. I didn't take photos. I just looked around and saw the full picture. The life she had built without me. I closed the door before they saw me and walked out. But I left something behind. Tucked under Miles's watch on the nightstand. I left a folded piece of hotel stationery with just 3 words written in my handwriting she would never mistake. I was here. Let that settle. Let it burrow into her thoughts like a splinter under the skin. When she found it, she'd panic. Not because I caught her in bed with someone else. She had moved past the guilt, but because I had proven I was still in the game. And worse, I wasn't playing by her rules anymore. The next day, I watched the chaos from a distance. She changed her locks, canceled appointments. Miles stopped showing up. Her social media went quiet. Whatever fantasy life she was building, it had been pierced. Just enough to make her uneasy, but not enough for her to know what was coming next. Jean sent me one final report later that evening. Bank transfers, LLC documents, a lease agreement in another state. It was all there. Clara had been planning to disappear with or without Miles before the year was out. She created a new identity through a consulting firm linked to Karen. The name on the paperwork, Clara Merritt Langley. She hadn't even changed her last name. She was planning to vanish under my name with my financials and start over as if I never existed. That was her final insult. But it would be my first move because now I had everything. The photos, the accounts, the partners, the receipts. And the moment she stepped out of her comfort zone again, just once, I'd be waiting. Not to beg, not to fight, but to expose her for exactly who she was. In her world, I had already disappeared. But she forgot something. Ghosts don't stay quiet forever. The morning I made my first move was deceptively ordinary. I had eggs at a diner 3 blocks from her studio and watched the steam swirl above the coffee I barely touched. Clara was already inside teaching one of her preteen ballet classes. I knew her schedule by heart now, not out of obsession but strategy. She always taught the 9 a.m. class on Mondays. Always left her phone in the back room while she danced. At 9:14, I made a call to her landlord's office. I used the number tied to the LLC she created with Karen, the one she thought was invisible. I told them we'd be terminating the lease early for the clause in the contract. Unexpected move, I said calmly. We've decided to relocate to Ohio. Then I drove straight to the small-town bank that held the joint account she forgot still existed. She hadn't touched it in months. That was her mistake. It still bore my name and hers, and I still had access. I emptied it to zero. Nothing illegal, nothing vengeful, just taking what was half mine before she buried it in shell accounts. She wouldn't even notice until the rent bounced or Karen called asking what happened to their escrow deposit. And then I did something that took a piece of me with it. I went to her home, not to speak with her, not to see her, just to finish what she started. The house was quiet, sun falling through the blinds like a warm lie. Her shoes were in the entryway, tossed sideways. Her sweater, the one I gave her on our 7th anniversary, was draped over the back of the couch like it didn't mean anything anymore. I walked past everything like I was visiting the museum of my own failure. I gathered a few things: birth certificate, tax forms, my father's watch, a box of old printed photos she never bothered to digitize, the little pieces of my life that still mattered. I took only what belonged to me and left everything else like a corpse in an unmarked grave. On the kitchen table, I placed a sealed manila envelope. Inside, a copy of the investigator's report, a list of every transaction under my name, and a handwritten note that simply said, "You could have ended it, but you chose to erase me instead." I walked out without looking back. By the time she returned that evening, the locks were changed, the utilities were frozen, her personal account was flagged for suspicious use due to shared credentials, and most importantly, the lease was terminated legally with her signature on the original paperwork. I made sure of that. She had no legal ground to stand on. No apartment, no backup savings, and no miles. He'd gone silent after I left the note in that hotel room. Either he figured out she was using him or he panicked when Jean sent him a single anonymous message containing just 3 words and a photo of the burner phone. She kept records. Cowards like him fold under pressure. He disappeared fast, deleted social accounts, left work early on Thursday. No one's seen him since. It was all falling apart, and she had no one to blame but herself. But the most unexpected moment came 2 days later. I was walking through the grocery store somewhere across town where no one knew my name when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered, "Hello." There was silence on the other end, then a breath, then her voice. "Merritt, what did you do?" I didn't say anything. I let the silence hang, let her feel it. The same silence she handed me in the kitchen that day when she ended our marriage with a mouthful of coffee and a dead stare. She repeated herself, her voice cracking this time. "What did you do?" I finally replied, "I gave you what you wanted, Clara. You said it was over. I'm just making sure it stays that way." She gasped, not in shock, in realization, because in that moment she understood. I hadn't just walked away. I had dismantled the life she built while pretending I no longer existed. And now I was the one watching her disappear. After Clara's call, I didn't expect to hear from her again. She was proud, calculated, the kind of person who would rather be ruined than admit she'd been beaten at her own game. But I underestimated just how much her world depended on keeping up appearances. And now that her money, her partner, her second life had evaporated, she was trapped inside the shell of a marriage she thought she'd already outgrown. That Friday she showed up. I was sitting in the rental apartment, the one above the sandwich shop, finishing a grilled cheese made with stale bread and no appetite. I heard footsteps on the stairs and then a knock. 2 sharp taps, then one softer. She always knocked like that. Even back when we were first dating, I didn't answer. She knocked again. "Merritt," she said, muffled through the door. "I know you're in there. Please just talk to me." I let her wait a full minute. Then I opened the door. She looked like a stranger, tired, pale, hair pulled back like she hadn't even tried. The Clara I knew would never have left the house without perfect eyeliner and some clever insult on her lips. But this Clara looked like the bottom had finally dropped out, and she wasn't ready for the fall. Her eyes searched mine, but I didn't flinch. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. She hesitated. I don't understand. Why are you doing this to me?" That was the first lie. Not what she said, but how. The way she made herself the victim in a world she had detonated. "I'm not doing anything to you," I said. "I'm undoing what you did to me. Quietly, just like you wanted." She stepped inside without asking. Still presumptuous, still acting like my space belonged to her by default. I didn't stop her. She looked around, saw the empty walls, the unopened boxes, the mattress on the floor. "This is where you've been living?" she asked. Her voice wobbled like she wanted me to feel ashamed, like she was still reaching for control, but it didn't work anymore. "I've been living in the truth," I said. "It's not glamorous, but at least it doesn't come with burner phones and fake leases." Her mouth tightened, You've been spying on me. No, I've been waking up. There's a difference. She took a breath like she was about to launch into a monologue, some grand speech to pull at my sympathy. She even reached for my hand, and for a split second, some ancient, broken piece of me twitched. That old reflex, the part of me that still remembered what it felt like to be chosen by her, to be loved, but it was gone. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared. Everything just got so complicated. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. You weren't scared, Clara. You were organized. You had a backup identity, a second partner, and you used my name to build it. That's not fear. That's planning. I thought maybe we could fix this, she said, and I swear she actually started crying. But it was too late. Not because of the cheating or even the fraud. It was what she did to me. She made me invisible in my own life. She turned me into a footnote in her story. I don't think you understand, I said quietly. I'm not coming back. There is no fixing. You left long before I did. You just didn't have the decency to pack a bag. I'm not here to fight you. I'm not even here to forgive you. I'm just done. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just stood there, blinking through mascara and silence. Then she turned to leave. But before she stepped out the door, she asked one final question. Are you going to ruin me? I shook my head. You already did that yourself. Then I closed the door. And this time I locked it. Not because I was scared she'd come back, but because I knew she wouldn't. Because women like Clara don't fear consequences. They fear being ignored. And now she was finally getting what she gave me all along. Silence. 3 weeks passed after I closed the door on Clara. She never called again. She didn't show up at the studio. She didn't try to claw her way back with more apologies, manipulations, or tears. Maybe she thought I'd come around. Or maybe she finally realized I was serious. Either way, she vanished from my daily reality just as efficiently as she had once vanished from our marriage. This time for good. In the meantime, I started rebuilding quietly, slowly, like someone learning to walk again after surgery. I got rid of the rental apartment above the sandwich shop. I found a new place, not big, but clean. 1 bedroom, hardwood floors, windows that faced a line of maple trees that turned gold in the afternoon light. The kind of place where silence didn't feel like punishment, felt like peace. I started going for walks again. I hadn't realized how much of my life I'd spent indoors, closed off from the world while I waited for someone else to decide how I should feel. I didn't want to live like that anymore. I also met people. Nothing romantic. I wasn't ready for that. But I joined a local book club, volunteered twice a week at the community center, helping install basic tech for seniors. I met a man named Deshaun who taught me how to play chess without making me feel stupid. I met a woman named Harper who owned the flower shop down the street and made fun of my terrible coffee order every morning. They didn't know my past. They didn't ask. And for once, I didn't feel the need to explain it. But the biggest change, I started writing. Not just in journals, real writing. I submitted a story about starting over to a local publication under a pen name. It got published, a small thing, a short piece, but it was mine. The truth is, Clara breaking me was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because betrayal makes you stronger, not that cliché. It's because her exit forced me to look at the parts of myself I had buried under compromise and silence. I realized I'd spent over a decade holding my breath. And now I could finally breathe. One afternoon, while unpacking a box of old photos, I found a picture of us at the beach. We looked happy, and maybe we were for a while. I stared at it for a long time, then tore it in half, not out of anger, but out of understanding. She was a chapter, not the whole story, and I still had pages to fill. So, I walked down to Harper's flower shop, bought a plant I didn't know the name of, and placed it on my windowsill. The sunlight hit it just right, and for the first time in years I didn't feel forgotten. I felt free.